So we can clean this a little bit up, because here you can see we are using the green one, and the green one is exactly the same as this one down here, and this one here is exactly the same as this one down here. So we actually don't need the middle part here, which we did. Here we used the green one, right? So instead of using this one here, I'm just going to use this one right in here. So, and we can delete this. Same thing goes here. So we can just simply use this one directly in theory. And we can get rid of this here. And we will end up with something even more accurate as we had before, because we're now using the right things. So let's see. The only problem is that it's now at the wrong position. It shouldn't be here, it should be here. We can just simply put in. So I think we actually need another here. I think I sort of did this wrong. Plug this in here. So like that here. We actually need another one because we need to offset it. We need to offset it behind the multiply with an add. Not a subtract would also work, but and it should be a 0.5. Let's use a 0. A 0 will be this part here, but I wanted this part here, so let's just offset it. 0.5 seems right. We just simply need to make sure we're also using 0.5 here. And that should be okay. Now the only thing that's left really is to also get a shadow on that guy here, which would be pretty much the same thing, just the other way around, the opposite. So we're just going to copy this here again. Okay, let's have a little bit more space down here. And since this resulted from G, this needs to result from R. And we actually need to combine this, multiply this now with this guy down here. As we did it up here, we just need to do it with the lower one now. And what we should end up with is something like this here. And we just need to combine those two now. So this one here and this one here. So we just simply add this together. All right. And now we should have a RAM for both parts. What is going on? Right. One offset isn't needed here. Maybe this one here. There we go. So this one goes over here and this one goes over here. I think this should be right. This is correct indeed. And this should give us sort of the right pattern which I want. It's correct. And now we just need to fill like the black parts. But before I do that, I want to like stretch things a little bit differently. This is what I want to stretch. So by changing this here, I'm just changing the shadow. Meaning we need this value also on the bottom one. So this value should control the shadow of the upper one and this lower one here. And by changing that, we are able to stretch this. But what this here stretches is actually the lower one. So go down here. And what value do we have? We had like a 15 here for now. Though what I want is the same thing the other way around. So we have one up here, but also related to the one at the bottom here. So by changing this one here, we can select the width. All right. So, and with that being a little bit stretched down here, we have the color ramp. And if we take a look here, if we change this, we can change the length of the whole thing with that color ramp here. So let's change the color ramp a little bit because I want this to be actually relatively thin for effect. So, and back here we have our overall scaler. Let's use a value for that. And things are still accurate as they should be. Now, the thing is we need to fill out those blacks. For that, we can just simply make ourselves a little bit more space here, drag that whole thing, copy that whole thing, and I'm going to connect this right here. Come on, let me please connect this, because we want to use the same coordinates. And we will essentially have the same thing down here again. Probably should make a reroute node for the bump part here. Exactly the same thing. Though I want to offset it, so we can just use math here. Actually the wrong one, because we need exactly this here, vector math multiply and add, so we can modify the coordinates further. All right, in here and put this back to a 1, and all I want to do is like offset it. How far do I want to offset? I don't know. Let's combine things first of all, so we can actually see it. So we want to combine this. We have this. Okay, so we can just simply take ourselves another mix RGB, plug both mix RGBs inside each other, and we can use the same mask up here again in theory. Just see. All right. And now we can use the add down here once it compiles. Okay, maybe we have connected it the wrong way around. Let's just flip this up in the mix RGB. And there we go. Now we just need to figure out the value it wants here. Maybe like a 0.025. Well, you know what? I'm just going to make myself a value here, a math node with a multiply to something relatively small. And the default value actually should be 0, it's fine. Though I only want to put this into X, meaning I need a combine X, Y, Z, and I only want this in X. And now I can very carefully drag it over and we can see which value it actually wants. That might be fine. And now I can also offset it on Y. So I'm going to use the same thing here. Let's start with a 0 on Y. Because if I now offset it on Y, we get this here. 15 seems about middle. And we got ourselves a thingy here. The last thing we need to do is combine our bump part, because we only have one connector right now. Drag this guy up here. So we have this here and we have this here, which seems about right. We just simply need to add them together. So let's get ourselves an add here, combine them. And if we combine them, we end up with that. There's one thing that irritates me. For some reason here it should go further. Right, so this is related to that. Meaning, you see, we sort of need to drag this color ramp just about in here. So those two relate to each other. I guess we could do some math for that, but it doesn't matter right now. So, and there we go. Now we get the correct thing. All right, and we get ourselves a nice pattern here. Now what we also can do is we have already created ourselves some color here, some color points, yeah, which would be this one here and this one here. We can just simply make ourselves a color ramp right in here before the last mix RGB, and we can now control the colors here. So for example, I want, let's see, a brownish with a white dot in the end. Yeah, things get eventually a little bit slow when you're mixing a lot of things. So I want a white here. Let's go top view. Relatively small white spots here. Right about this color here. You should be a little bit darker. A little bit more like that. That seems about right. And let's put one right in here as well in the middle. Dragging this a bit over. And alright. I'm just going to copy the color ramp because I want the same values over here as well. And now we should get up, end up with something rather usable. We can delete this light here, or go this view here, and we will see some stuff happening. That's okay. Go render again, and let's get ourselves sun actually. So a sun will produce harder shadows than a point light. Just looking if everything looks correct. I mean, it's not perfect, but I just make those things up as I go, so whatever. I guess it's a fine pattern. We're also just faking the depth with only a bump. Like, there are different qualities of faking depth or just creating depth. The lowest is a bump. Then there's like a mathematical bump stuff. What is it called? A parallax bump offset. And then is there the normal, etc. There are multiple things, and we're using the lowest one possible. And for that, I think actually I'm pretty happy about it. It's looking pretty reasonable. So I'm going to show you a complete overview of everything. So here we have our coordinates for overall scaling, right? And here we have the coordinates which we just used to offset it perfectly. So those shouldn't actually be touched. Let's make ourselves a frame. And we are naming this here. If we press N, we can name it here. By the way, you can open this full window by pressing Control Space. And we're naming this here No Touchy. And we forgot to drag down, if we take a look at our bump, here, our bump result, that those two color ramps always work together. So we have to fix one of those up here as well. So with that, it's actually accurate. Thing is, it's not quite tileable yet. You can see how it starts here with like half of it, but here it doesn't start with half of it. So when we bake it, it's not going to be tileable, yeah? So we have to sort of fix this by giving it clear values here. So down here, maybe a 3 would be just fine. A 3, yeah. By using round values in this case, it should be tileable. So let's just see. This looks about accurate. Yes. We can just test it. Let's bake it down. So we need an image texture. So we can actually create an image and we can actually bake it down. So let's create a new one here and we're going to multiply this times 4. Now, one thing I didn't mention when I explained the images in one of the last videos, that you usually want to use always power of 2. Power of 2 means you're starting with a 2 by 2. This is the smallest power of 2 image you can have. And when you multiply this with another power of 2, so power of 2 would be 2, 4, 8. So if you multiply this by 8 again, and we, let's say, multiply this by 8 again, and multiply this by 8 again, you will end up with a default 1024. And if you multiply this by another power of 2, but 4, so 2, 4, we will end up with a 4K image. And we call this wood grid 1, actually diff for diffuse, because this is the color. Wood grid diff and underscore 1, just in case we have multiple. And what I usually do is, it's a very good practice to do whenever you have a texture. Name it underscore text in the end. It's a default thing for Unreal, but everything that is a freaking texture underscore text in the end. Okay, no alpha, hit OK. And now we want to bake this on. So we have the image we want to bake it on. We have the plane here. If we go now to cycles, we should probably change to material view here. Cycles, in cycles, because cycles is a ray tracing engine and it shoots rays down, so it can accurately bake. It's the only engine that can bake in this case. And here you can change one thing. This is originally at combined, but we want to change it to emit because we want to bake the raw color, so the emission data, yeah, the raw data. So we're also not going to connect our principal shader, we're going to connect our raw data, which we want to bake. We only want to bake this part. If we wanted to bake the bump, we would connect it afterwards and create our own image from that. So connect your raw data, change it to cycles, change it to emit, select your image, select the object you want to bake and hit bake. This can take a second as it's a 4K image. All right. And with that, we got it baked down. If you connect this now, we're going to see the exact same thing. I want to test if it's tileable right away. So let's use UV map. Let's use a vector math, connected, make this to multiply, change it to 1. Let's give it a value and 1. And we see if this is tileable. Do we see any weird pattern? We don't. So it's tileable. And we want to save this image inside the Blender file. So let's go tab, texture paint, press N to open the side window and hit save all images. With that, it is saved inside the Blender file. Normally, when you have textures, they are separate, stored from the actual Blender file. So the Blender file is its own file on your PC. The image is its own file on PC. If you don't save it that way, it will not. It will be disappearing next time you open Blender. But with that, and with going to File, External Data, Pack Resources, and now save, now the image is saved inside the Blender file and is not separate from your actual Blender file on your PC. So we have this image now here. Let's go back to object mode. We also want to bake down the bump map because we also need the depth in our own image. So we create another image and we are going to create a new, and we call this, what do we call the other guy? I'm just going to copy the name here, Control Z with a mouse over it, new, Control V, and this is not div, in this case it's bump underscore, and all good, let's hit OK. And here we can change it to a non-color because images usually store 3 values, RGB and also alpha if it's a PNG. Doesn't really matter, you always save your images as PNGs, so it will have those for channel red, green, blue and alpha. But if we change it to a non-color, it's not going to store RGB and alpha, it's going to store just one channel, yeah, which makes the texture obviously lighter because it's like just 1/4 of the whole thing. And when you don't need it, you save it that way because it's easier to load and easier to save, it's smaller, whatever, it's better. So we want to now bake our black and white values here. Same thing, select your object, change it to cycles, under bake, change it to emit, connect the raw data you want to bake, select your image and hit bake. So with that, we also bake this image, make sure you go texture paint, save all images. And usually I also go over here, but it shouldn't matter. Yeah, no new files were packed, so we can just save it. It's okay. And we got our color and we got our bump, which should use the same coordinates as the texture. We can copy our principal shader. We can plug in our color. We can plug in our bump. We need a bump here, bump, and this goes into the height. If we now connect this, it will load quite a lot faster. And we will get our thingy here. Now we should lower the value. What did we use here? Like a 0.01. And there we go. And we get our thingy here. All right. Maybe you should change this back to 1. All right.